What is backward design and alignment? Alignment and backward design are instructional strategies paramount for successful course design. An alignment is a condition in which all the counterparts within a group or relationship work together. Think of gears that turn together to cause the minute hand to move on a clock. All the pieces must interlock in order for the clock to keep time. In course design, there are 5 counterparts that must be aligned to ensure student success. They are learning objectives, assessments, instructional activities, resources, and course technology. The way these 5 counterparts work together is referred to as alignment. The instructional strategy called backward design stipulates the order of the alignment. Backward design focuses on what students need to learn rather than what we want to teach. If you start at the end goal, meaning you start with what students should know and work backward, you are assured that your students finish your course with an understanding of what is most important for them to learn. Once course objectives are established, you must next decide on how you want to assess the student's ability to successfully complete the objective. In order for the objective and the assessment to be aligned, they must work together. For instance, if the objective is for the learner to be able to demonstrate the ability to make a flaky pie crust, but the assessment is a multiple choice test, the objective is not aligned with the assessment. Again, working backwards, the third counterpart of an alignment map is the instructional activities that prepare the student to achieve success on the assessment. Using our pie crust example, aligned activities would be for students to weigh ingredients, roll pie dough, etc. Because it would not prepare the student to achieve the assessment, a misaligned activity for this particular objective would be to read an article on the history of pies. Still working backwards, the 4th step in our backwards alignment map is to provide resources that will help the student do the instructional activities. For instance, in order for a student to make a flaky crust, you may assign text to read and pie crust demonstrations to watch to prepare them to successfully complete the activity. Lastly, if you use technology in your course, it must also align. Using our pie crust example, technology such as a word processing program requiring a student to write a paper would not align with this particular objective, but a video demonstration of the student making the pie would. Now you have it, backwards design and alignment working together for quality course design.
Hi, thanks for tuning in to learn a bit about the backward design process over the next 5 minutes or so. The ideas come from Wiggins and McTighe in their book Understanding by Design. Since backward design is essentially a course planning process, let's start with a scenario. Say I'm planning to teach a course in filmmaking to a group of undergraduates. We'll call it Filmmaking 101. I've talked to some colleagues who've inspired me with suggestions for some great activities like script writing, storyboarding. Hey, maybe I can even get them to produce a short film. But hang on. This is beginning to sound like a long to-do list. I need to set the stage for learning, not just doing. After all, what is really important to learn about filmmaking? What inspires learners? And how can they use that to guide their learning? And can I plan for understanding, or does it just happen? The 3-stage backward design process is built on the premise that you can design for understanding when you start with your goals and work backward to uncover what your learners need to know in order to meet them. In stage 1, you're envisioning what's important for learners to understand and grapple with, to know and to do. You're defining your learning outcomes. In stage 2, you're identifying what evidence you and your learners need in order to assess progress towards those outcomes. And in stage 3, you'll be designing the activities that will result in that evidence of understanding. Each stage builds on the other and makes it easier for you to design for meaningful learning. It's called backward because instead of starting with what you'll do in your course, you're starting with what you intend for learners to know and understand. Let's see how this works in practice. Back to our course example. I'm hoping that by the end of my course, learners will understand something about the role and meaning of storytelling and be able to apply that understanding to the development of their own projects. Likely an exam won't give me or my learners the kind of evidence of understanding we're looking for. But the development of filmmaking projects will, and that'll encourage them to draw on their own inspirations or questions. And, like with all learning, they'll need many opportunities to practice and get feedback on the component parts of a larger project. So we'll build that in, which will include technical aspects and learning how to work together, which are important aspects of the discipline of filmmaking. I also want to make space for thinking and discussing about the essential question, what's the role of storytelling? To get a broader perspective on this, I want students to connect with a broad range of people with different backgrounds and experiences, people outside of class. So I'll build that into my plan. Let's recap. What makes backward design effective? Well, starting with a vision for the essential outcomes for learners and defining goals sets you on a path to create an environment for learning. From there, planning opportunities for learners to produce the evidence needed to evaluate progress towards goals. And lastly, careful planning of activities and the use of resources to help them create that evidence results in alignment between goals, assessment, and activities, kind of the linchpin of effective learning design. Of course, the kind of careful planning that backward design requires involves thinking and questioning at each stage of the process. When thinking about outcomes, what is worthy of understanding? What are the essential questions that learners will need to grapple with? And what's important for them to know and do? When thinking about assessment evidence, what is acceptable evidence? What role will learners have? And how much evidence do we need to collect? When thinking about activities, what sort of activities will support our goals, help build understanding, and help learners make meaning? There are guides to help with that process of thinking through those questions. For example, to help you determine what's worthy of understanding when it comes to your course, 4 filters are proposed. That it has some kind of enduring value, is core to the discipline, requires uncoverage, and engages inquiry. So I'm going to check that against the goal that I had for understanding, which is understand the role of storytelling. I think it meets the criteria. 6 facets of understanding help you to define the qualities that might be associated with understanding. You can find a rubric online that expresses this in more detail. So to sum up, backward design supports understanding, which is really at the heart of meaningful learning. Thanks for tuning in.
And your last step will be designing learning activities or any other materials that will be necessary for your learners to get to where you need them to get. So, Dr. Michelle Ford, could you please introduce yourself, and then if you can just mention how you use backward design in your online course design and teaching.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So just so everyone knows, I teach fully all the time in the online modalities. So the concept of backward design is really important in terms of helping learners understand what my objectives are, what our goals are for the course in general. So as Tonka said, we start with the objectives, and to give you, I think, a better sense of this, I'll start with a concrete example of what backward design is. It might be the easiest way to explain. I teach a grief and loss course, and so one of the assignments from that course, we ask students to compare and contrast their own culture with another culture that's not their own, and to think about how their sort of family response to a particular death ritual compares to and contrasts with that of another culture. So that's sort of the overall learning objective. And then I think about the assessment and how, how we're going to get there. The default for something like that, as you might know, is a written assignment. So it's usually a 5 to 7 page essay, something like that. But I really wanted to explore how students could meet these objectives in a different way. So they're given the option to submit either an essay, which again is the default, or a multimedia presentation. Some students have done videos, some students have done audio recordings and submitted PowerPoint presentations. So they have some choice, they have some options in terms of how they get there. And then to support all of that, the actual module itself has some learning activities that help students start to think through how they might do this particular assessment and reach the objectives of the module. So for example, we have readings in the module that support a consideration of cultures, of how various cultures respond to grief and loss and death rituals, how family functions differently in various cultures. And then we also have a discussion board, and students, interestingly, by talking about their own cultures, they end up teaching each other what it might mean to approach this topic from a multicultural or intercultural perspective. And the whole module is really sort of richly drawn, and there's a nice frame around it so that we're meeting the objectives in a really thoughtful, deliberate way. I find it helpful as an instructor because it keeps me on task, and students are aware of what they need to do, where they need to go, and maybe how they can get there in a thoughtful way. So I find it very helpful in terms of my own pedagogy.
Thank you very much. Do you have any information about how students perceive that kind of activity, that kind of assessment? Do they like it? Do they not? Do they feel they learn from it?
I do. So we're, predictably assessed at the end of every term. Students are given the opportunity to give us feedback on not only on the course but also on our teaching. And so they perceive the backward design. And of course, they don't use that phrase, but what they say things like they understood what their what course expectations were, that my feedback was consistent with what they understood, that they felt they could find some academic success and some and again, they're not using these words, but they have an opportunity for developmental progress because they understand how they need to almost the course is road mapped for them. So they understand what they hope to get out of it, what I hope they're learning, and they find themselves in the course and it's aligned with what the intention of the course is, with what the course objectives are.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your time and for your advice. Thank you.
Thank you very much.